Welcome back to Sim Racing Tonight, man. That Gregor Hutu never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah, me either. He's the definition of alien.
Yeah, smooth as silk.
Definitely. So now it's time for History of Sim Racing Part 3, and now we're to that era where I think it starts really getting good.
Yeah, let's check it out.
Back for more History of Sim Racing, and it's September of 1998, and the NROS, or NASCAR Racing Online Series, is just getting fired up. To run in the NROS, you had to have a 10 account for one, then depending on your ranking on 10, you were put into either Pro, Intermediate, or Beginner. I was just under the average of a 2.0 ranking, so I was put into the Intermediate division. We raced at 2 different tracks each week. Each competitor had a 3-day window to run their race at a particular track. Then 10 automatically recorded the results in a database. The top 8 finishers in the Pro Division got a free trip to Daytona and free tickets to the Daytona 500 and the Busch race as well. They also got a shot at the title and the $3,000 check and a crystal trophy that went with it. In the Intermediate and Beginner divisions, the prizes were a lot smaller and the top 15 made it to the finale, which was run on 10. The season ran from September through December of '98. At the end of the season, the top 45 got to run in a sort of a race for the chase, which got you to the finale at Atlanta. That ran 2 races per week throughout the month of January. We all got one of these cool fleece jackets for making it to the championships, too. Beginner ran the same way, and our 2 divisions used a fixed setup. Luckily, I had done a lot of league racing, so I was familiar with most of the tracks. I won a few of the races, which is how I made it to the finals. Don't recall how I got the DNF, but here's the final standings for the Intermediate division. The playoff, so to speak, to get to the finals was intense. Every week, the best of the best N2 drivers were duking it out. In the end, these 8 pro drivers won that trip to Daytona where they battled it out for that trophy and the cash. Kevin Engelbeck, Bill Bollinger, Dave Traeger, Mike Blackstock, Donnie Leah, Dave Brown, and Darren Stevens were those 8 guys. Some of those guys even actually went on to become real race car drivers, and still do to this day. Donnie Leah, as a matter of fact, had a truck ride not too long ago. Kevin Engelbeck had a good cushion heading into Daytona as Bill Bollinger won the race. Kevin held on to win the one and only NROS championship. Never heard much about Kevin after 10, or at all for that matter. After the NROS finals, as sim racers, we had hoped for NROS 2 and heard that it may happen. But eventually a bomb was dropped on all of us.
So 10 was closing its doors now to host card games and different things like that. As a sim racer, I just didn't get it. There were always people racing on 10, but then I read Heim's story and it all makes sense now. NASCAR was taking 1/3 of the revenue, Sierra a third, which left the final third to 10, and that didn't even cover their costs. They were losing money hand over fist because of NROS. So they severed ties with Sierra and NASCAR and are still thriving today as Pogo. So where did that leave all of us sim racers? To fend for ourselves with privately owned or leased servers. Companies like RacingServers.net started cropping up everywhere, so there were alternatives. You just needed to find a good host.
Now I need to backtrack in time a bit. At about the same time the NROS launched, the racing simulation that set the bar for real-world driving physics was released by Papyrus. Grand Prix Legends, better known as GPL, came out and it modeled the 1967 Grand Prix season to perfection, with Watkins Glen, Monza, Spa, Rouen, Mosport, Silverstone, Kyalami, Zandvoort, Mexico City, Monte Carlo, and the mighty 14-mile Nürburgring.
It came with 5 historically accurate cars, the Lotus Ford 49, the Repco Brabham BT24, the Eagle Westlake T1G, the Ferrari 312, and the BRM H16. Papyrus also included 2 fantasy cars, the Marasima and the Coventry, which took the places of the missing Honda and Cooper. The drivers were in the game as well, Gurney, Clark, Hill, McLaren, and many other real-life racing heroes. Well, for me, and a lot of road racing fanatics around the world, GPL, like I said earlier, set the bar for realism. NASCAR 2 seemed like an arcade game in comparison. The suspension actually moved and the car reacted like it. Driving NASCAR 2, the car had no feel to it. It didn't feel like it had suspension or tires like GPL did. One of the problems for GPL was that the learning curve was too steep, and in regards to the retail aspect of it, no one was all that interested in the 1967 Grand Prix season as a gaming platform. For the diehard sim racer, it was heaven. The crowd I came from didn't care for it much or really at all. Getting a true NASCAR sim racer over to GPL was near impossible unless they were a true road racer. Most of them said, "It's too hard, I'm going back to practice for my next stock car race." GPL was ahead of its time, and moving forward 10 years, there's no question about it now. GPL spawned a mostly international community that is still around to this day. It is without a doubt the longest running / supported racing simulation ever made. To this day, mods and tracks are still being made for it.
Not long after GPL's debut, VROC was launched. VROC hosted GPL and it allowed you to see the servers that were set up for racing. This was similar to 10, but the servers were privately owned and this was free, unless you owned the server, of course. VROC was also set up privately and was not affiliated with Papyrus. After a few patches, Papyrus no longer supported GPL, but again, the community sure did. So many tracks were done as well as graphical enhancements. Different years were modeled as well, and still are to this day. So with 10 now closed, I set my sights on GPL as a driver as well as the privately run NASCAR leagues. Eventually I started up SSCA again and ran various forms of stock car series with some of the games that were coming out. NASCAR Legends, the Craftsman Truck Series, as well as Busch. But they all used dated N2 physics. NASCAR 3 was on the horizon. Rumor had it was going to use the same physics engine as GPL.
Well, Sierra didn't think that the world was ready to drive something that felt that real, and I think it may have been in part to the lackluster sales of GPL. So N3 was just a graphical update to N2. No change to the physics. I, for one, was not pleased with yet another NASCAR title with basically the same guts. I raced it, but NASCAR 4 was what I personally looked forward to, as I was still running GPL here and there. Some games I'd like to mention that came around along these times that also set some bars: Sports Car GT, the Ratbag Dirt Track Racing and Sprint Car games, NASCAR Heat, Grand Prix Series by Crammond, Viper Racing by Sierra, and Burnout, which was pretty much the only drag racing sim that was recognized as halfway decent.
So NASCAR 4 was finally released in 2001, and some people loved it and some people hated it. I was one that actually loved it. We ran a season in SSCA with it and had a great time. I think because people thought it was so tough, Sierra quickly came out with NASCAR 2002 season. It was basically a dumbed-down NASCAR 4. Then right around the corner was NASCAR 2003 season. On February 14, 2003, NASCAR 2003 hit the shelves. NASCAR 2003 is still to this day the preferred stock car sim. Finding it is tough, and as a matter of fact, you usually can't find it for less than $100 on eBay. After 2003 was out for a while, Papyrus decided to unlock what was previously unavailable within the NASCAR 2003 executable. That's where my story on the history of sim racing ends. Next episode of Sim Racing Tonight, we do an in-depth on NASCAR 2003 and all the mods that spawned after the patch 1201 was out in September of 03. Hope you enjoyed my segment on the history of sim racing. I'm Darren Ganji.
All right, another great segment, and 3 of them in a row, but I got to ask you, what was your favorite sim to talk about?
Probably actually the NROS Championship, so that was NASCAR 2 on 10. And actually Grand Prix Legends. Really enjoyed talking about that. You know, Grand Prix Legends, like I said in my segment, set the bar for the modern day physics engine. Yeah, one of the greatest sims ever. It's a sim that everyone will always compare a new one to, and even though it's dated, it's still the one that raised that plateau. Yeah, and still running today. So that's about it for episode 3. Yeah, another great show. Had a good time. I did too, and I'm Darren Ganji. And Sean Cole. We'll see you later.